Welcome to the Bearded Finisher Podcast, your one-stop show for all things finishing and coatings. Your host, Zach, and a variety of industry experts will guide you through the art of perfecting your finishing and business game. From seasoned pros to fresh faces, get ready for tips, tricks, and trends to elevate your knowledge and business to the next level.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Bearded Finisher Podcast. Today, we have got the one, the only Mr. Nick Slavik out of New Prague, Minnesota. What's going on, Nick?
Oh man, I feel like this podcast was tailor-made for me. The beard. I love this. I assume this is only beard talk. Yes?
Sure. We can go beard talk. I love it. I don't see how what is it? Once a year or twice a year that I see you shave that thing off.
It's really interesting. You know very shortly that there is a respirator video coming out when I shave, because that's really the only time I have to be in compliance, and I do it.
I see that and I'm just like, show that to my wife sometimes when I'm cruising the internet and she looks at me, she goes, nope, can't do it.
It's funny how guys like us, either it's a complete value add or a complete value detract by shaving. Some people are way better with the beard and some people are way better without. And it's just, I don't know what factors go into it, but everybody knows what it is.
I know and my wife and my kids, my oldest son turns 7 Saturday. They've never seen me without a beard.
I made my daughter cry once on one of these respirator video things. I just walked in, I just think of it as like a point of doing business. Like, hey, I do this, I shave, I do my video. I come home and my daughter's just like, who the heck are you?
My wife tells me, like, her dad's he's been a big mentor of mine in the business, but he's always had a mustache. And my wife tells me a story when she was, 3rd, 4th grade. She came home and his wife, mother-in-law, made him shave his mustache. She said, I think you need to get rid of it. So he shaved it. And my wife came home and she just could not, locked herself in the garage crying for 2 hours because she could not figure out why her Uncle D, which is her dad's brother, was lying to her, because he kept saying that he was her dad. She was convinced, you are not my dad. And after that, I don't think he ever shaved it again.
Crazy, man. Yeah.
You don't think how much it affects these little kids. They can't put that sort of perspective on things. Like, it's just facial hair. They don't understand that.
Yeah, agreed, man. It's weird to see it through their eyes.
Yeah, I couldn't even imagine. Every once in a while I think about it and I'm like, nah, it's headed towards full Santa Claus, and I'm just like, yeah, we're just gonna let it go. Not even gonna try and save it. Well, I know we talked a little bit offline. You are very influential in our community. You've done so much for the painting world and these guys learning to actually run a business instead of just own a painting company, which I think is a huge asset to our community. But one thing that I know I've never heard is, 16 years, I think you've had Nick Slavik Painting Company, somewhere right around there, correct?
Yeah, we're bumping up on 17. Yeah.
So how did it all start? Clearly you're not 17 or 30.
There was time before this painting business. I wasn't just born into a painting business, Zach.
What did you do? What'd you do before painting? I know you were in the military, so I'd love to kind of hear about that a little bit, and then how that led up to where we're at now.
Yeah. So the broad strokes, and I'll let you go as deep in any of these things as you want, but between about 10 and 18, I was really an indentured servant to my family business. It's like dad had a painting business. Mom did the books. My brother Tony painted too, and I painted too. The second we could put up an extension ladder, we put up an extension ladder. And not only was it daycare in the summers, but it was like, getting some stuff done, revenue producing for the family. So I did that in my formative years. I did not like it as much as I like it now, because like all humans, when you're forced to do something, you don't like it as much as when you choose it yourself. I graduated high school, 4 years of active duty service in the military, got my GI Bill, got a college education, and very shortly after, rift in the family. I was ready to join my own family business, my father's business, and do this for him, the things I'm doing for the industry in my own business. And he just didn't have a place for me. And so I started my own business. So 17 years later, almost 17 years later, here we are.
Wow. So when you, that's
There's a lot in there.
It's one of the fastest summaries I think I've ever heard. That's impressive.
Well, Zach, you probably know this about me, but my personality is brief and bright. I do bullet point stuff and then expound later.
Exactly. So let's kind of talk about Slavik painting. Let's talk about how you guys have grown over the years as far as, I know you've got multiple estimators now, and one of the pain points a lot of guys run into is how to get to that point, how to know when they're at the point that it's time to either add estimators or add an office person and so on and so forth. So how did you judge that?
Yeah, I got this really cool graph that I share when I go around and do my master's classes, because, it's data and feelings, right? It's I want to actually show people what that is. You can say, I grew to this in this amount of time, but I actually show over a 5 to 7 year graph who I added where, what my revenue levels were at, the things we added, the things we took away. And so basically the story is, I really wanted to professionalize this business, and I did it in a very not bad. I did it in a very stressful way because I thought I could just do it all myself. And I didn't, well, I shouldn't, that's not completely accurate. I didn't know I can do it with others. That is more accurate. So it wasn't like I looked around and I saw all these awesome resources and said, oh, I'm smarter than that. I literally, I grew up on such an island with no resources, no connection to the industry, that I thought every time I had a friction point, I was the first human to ever experience it. And then I would go out and try to solve it in a whole bunch of ways, gather the data and do it. If I had to redo this all over again, I would go find the PCA. I would go find people like you. I would go find other people in the industry and just ask them how to do it. And you could gather it up real easy. So how do you know when it's time to add? Well, now that I've been through it, and now that I have a whole bunch of industry resources and I have access to thousands of painting companies across the United States, it's simple, but not easy. The simple is it's a math problem. You need about $1 to $1.5 million in revenue to add either an estimator or a project manager, potentially even both. I know that, but doing that is very hard. Number one, just getting past some revenue humps to that area to be able to generate enough revenue to afford them is difficult enough, while maintaining a normal life, possibly keeping your marriage intact, your kids knowing your face. I mean, things like that. It's all very difficult. So to just say, if you just do 1.5 in revenue, you can afford a project manager. What happens between $1 and $1.5 million could blow your marriage up, ruin your relationship with your kids, lose your house, and put you in the hospital for stress too. So I don't want to overlook that part. And then basically after that, in the residential repaint world, I think about it as $1.5 million Lego pieces, where, when you grow, you don't go from 1.5 to 1.8. You go from 1.5 to 3, because if you incrementally add more labor, now you're one project manager, instead of managing 1.5 million, is having to manage 2, and they're super stressed out. And then it falls apart. There's these troughs that you got to jump through as you go.
Yeah, you're going to take some steps back to go forward, 100%.
Probably more personally and emotionally, yes.
I remember growing, and when I was started that growth phase, and then I got to about 15 guys, and it was too much. Like, you were feeding a monster, and that was just about all you were doing. You couldn't do anything else. I mean, and it's something that I try to encourage people to just evaluate when you get into this business is, what's the end goal? Like, what do you want? Do you want a legacy? Do you want to be comfortable? And define those goals very clearly before you start growing, because it can get out of hand. And I mean, you've been doing this longer than I have, but my rule of thumb was, I got to the point to where it's about like 8 to 10 you can do with one person.
Yeah, based on your personality, you're a hard charger. 8 to 10 human beings to manage is a lot, especially when you estimate, you project manage, you coordinate, you hold accountability. They're your direct reports. Yeah, most of us with a pretty high pain tolerance and a pretty good work ethic, that's a pretty good number. But the thing that makes that go wrong is 3 callbacks one week on 3 different projects. And all of a sudden you're not moving forward. You're having to keep moving forward and then also going back and do other stuff. So underneath what you said is a very important thing, which is a foundation of consistency and standards and things like that. So that when you do have 8 to 10, like right now we got this beautiful little business unit. There's probably about 10 to 12 part-time craftspeople that come back to me every year, high school kids, college kids, and teachers. We have trained the hell out of them. They know our SOPs, they bleed our company core values, and they replicate, they bring their friends year after year. And there's this beautiful thing. Some of them have been with me 7 or 8 years. And the only reason, all they do basically is come back and do small exterior projects and decks. And those are sometimes the most complicated. And the reason it works is because of that baseline of we have a standard operating procedure. We have training. These guys have done it forever. They share our core values. They train each other. If you just take 10 to 12 college kids, throw them out to stain decks, you're going to be buying decks for people, right?
Yes, 100%. Well, and I have noticed that over the years of watching you, that you and my father-in-law are very similar, and kind of the ways that he taught me was, if you've got a big project, you can put 2 crews on there, but a 2-man crew is about, you could run a 3rd guy part-time, but 2-man crews are just a great sweet spot of everyone is going to be working. No one is going to be slouching off. No one's going to be hiding. If you're not working, it's visual. Like, it is seen immediately. And a lot of these crews out there think you got to have 5, 6 guys painting a house. And I'm like,
there is a pretty interesting data set that I can show people from hundreds of thousands of hours of labor that says the more people you put on a job site, the productivity and the profitability goes down. It just is what it is. And now the data is interesting, which is about a third of my full timers are single person crews because of their personality. They just function way better like that. I personally have done an experiment years in the past where I broke the entire company up into single person crews. And it was one of the most profitable quarters I ever had. And 3 people quit because the stress of working alone is bad. So it's that weird thing where what's best for the business and best for my humans meet at about a 2-person crew based on your personality. Yeah. And personally, if you just said, Nick, wave the magic wand, ultimate crew size, I'd say 1. Literally just 1 human. It's the most efficient.
Never done 1. That's an interesting concept. I could see how that would be the most efficient, especially if you incentivize your people.
Asterisk based on personality, because some people get super bummed out and sad when they don't have help, even if it ruins their budgets. Yeah.
That's 100% the case. Oh man, now you got me thinking. I'm like, so do you ever? Let's kind of parlay that into how you've strategized and used social media in the business aspect, as far as on the marketing side, because you have a great following. Is it mostly professionals, or do you also use it for the painting side?
What's really interesting, I think I've been posting actively for 12 years on Facebook, and however long Instagram's been around, not 12 years, I don't think. And so originally it's always been just like, I love my life. I'm very passionate about a lot of things. I share a lot of images about it, and it kind of attracted, personal, professional people all over the place. The second I started Ask a Painter Live, most people don't understand. Harken back to 8 years ago to the advent of Ask a Painter Live. It was actually for people in my area who were homeowners who wanted to ask a professional painter questions. And it wasn't but 6 episodes in, and the entire professional painting community said, step aside, homeowners. We'll take it from here. This is interesting to us. And literally, there's a couple people that used to work for me that don't work for me anymore, that are teachers or whatever, that are homeowners that watch. But I don't know how many civilians watch Ask. It literally is just for the professional painting community. So it's been interesting to go on like a 10-year arc of everything that I've done has really been for people who live in New Prague, just to like a base of knowledge who follow me, and then the professional painting community worldwide. And only in the last 2 years have I really leaned into painting business stuff, because everything else was like, people think, well, Nick, you got it easy. Clients line up outside your house for a chance for you to paint their house because of Ask a Painter, right? And people line up outside your business for a chance to apprentice under you because of Ask a Painter. It's like, remember, none of my clients know that I'm on social media for the most part. Like it's becoming more and more that they know it, but I'm not getting any jobs from Ask a Painter, really. I'm not getting any apprentices from Ask a Painter, so it's, in the last 2 years, I've got insanely serious with marketing. I've sensed a change in the marketplace. Two big things we need to solve: labor and leads. For 10 to 15 years, it's been tough on labor, and it's been a little easier on leads. 2 years ago, I sensed that was changing. I saw the data. I had the feelings from the community. I believe that is fully switched now. It's much harder to find leads. It's much easier to find labor. So I started leaning into social media for my painting business, and the data has been really cool. I just did a redux of last week of all the leads that came in. And I used to be super heavy in word of mouth repeat referral, super heavy in direct mail, and those comprised about 80%. Now I have 13 marketing channels that comprise the most. The marketing channel with the most is about 22%. So my goal was to not be so heavy in one area. I have diversified across 13 areas of marketing. So it's a steady professional flow now, instead of super high in one area, super low in one area. So it's been a shift in my social media to more, I've actually given some time to my painting business.
Nice. I mean, that's interesting, because I see a lot of guys pouring. I mean, and you have to pour a decent amount of money into social media marketing to find what works. But it wasn't huge. It was out there, but it wasn't huge when I had my painting company. So, I was almost probably identical to you. I was very heavy in word of mouth, contractors that we worked for, callback customers.
And Zach, I think that's our entire industry. I mean, our entire industry is largely made up of 99% single owner operators who don't advertise. So literally it's family, friends, coworkers, people in close proximity to you. And, it's one of those things that I think that's a majority of our industry.
That's a huge majority. And those guys are starting to, I think you're right. I mean, now that I think about it, those guys are kind of starting to go, hey, it's not getting as busy as it was 2 years ago. So kind of helping these guys learn a little bit of marketing would be huge.
Oh, it's crazy, because there's a couple online painter groups on Facebook that I use as kind of like the pulse of the industry. And you can see the tide has completely changed to where's all the good people to where's all the good leads. And what's most interesting for me is that it's June in the upper Midwest and guys are saying, I don't have one job on the books. That to me is market. Like that's something that I take notice. When guys say that in December in the upper Midwest, of course, we fight for December in the upper Midwest. But when you're a house painter in June in Minnesota and Wisconsin and you have no jobs, something's changing.
Yeah. Yeah. It is definitely a changing market. Well, I noticed when I kind of got out of the business and sold my company and then went to the manufacturing side, one thing I saw was right around COVID, it seemed like a lot of painters came about. I mean, it seemed like there was an influx in not DIY, but I'm going to start a painting company. I'm going to start a refinishing company. I'm going to do this. There was a lot of those guys, and I'm seeing a lot of those guys now are struggling. They're hitting that 2.5, 3 year mark, but the COVID effect, we'll call it, is pretty much gone.
Well, what's really interesting, I've been working with one of my business coaches on this because leads are down this year. My marketing is effective, but leads are down year over year, and website traffic is down year over year. So when I start seeing a trend like that, especially when in May and June it should be wrapping up in the upper Midwest, I go to the data and then I start working on it with my coach. And we were trying to figure out something that happened year over year, and we couldn't really find anything. So we started looking back 1, 2, 3, 4 years. And I track my leads per week. I tracked it all the way back. Well, I have this for forever, but we got back to 2019, and 2019 and early 2020, we had about the same amount of leads and website traffic that we do now. COVID happened, everybody got free money and it went bonanza. I was getting double the amount of leads everywhere. And so it's really, sometimes you're too close to the graph and you're looking at 12 months. But when you stand back, you can see my business is going a nice steady line. COVID, 2023, 24, and back to where it was, steady line up again. And you're like, we're not failing. Everybody had Ozempic for the last 3 years. And it was just like jazz. Everybody got jazzed up, free money. Nobody's taking trips. Everybody's painting their house. Businesses are starting up everywhere. And guess what? That money is running out. People's debt, savings are running out. Debt is going up. And we're kind of like, if I had to propose a theory, not an economist, I don't know how to time markets, none of that stuff. I'm looking at painting business data. I think the money's run out. And I think we're actually back to normal. And now you actually have to get out there and run a real business.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, the money's gone. No one's got any of that. You've actually got to work. It's not just flowing in. I've noticed that. It's
back to office, Zach.
Get back in the office. This is kind of where I'm like, woohoo, I'm glad I sold when I sold.
Yeah, man. You probably timed it really well. So yeah. And what's really interesting too is that they say there is a recession every 7 to 10 years. And I started my business in 2007 at the Great Recession, right? The housing crisis and all this other stuff. So basically we should have about 2017, 2018, 2019, right around in there. We should have had a recession. We might have been cyclically going into one, and then wacky times happen, COVID times happen, and the basic economics get thrown out the window. So, I mean, I don't know enough to prognosticate about any of that stuff. All I know is that when you hear the smartest economists in the world say every 7 to 10 years we have some sort of downturn, it's kind of been champagne for 15 years.
Yeah, it's got to happen. Like you've got to have a correction. Like you're not always going to go in a vertical. I mean, you're going to have a slight dipper there. And I think 23 was kind of the start of that, but we'll see how this wonderful election year goes.
Who knows, man? I paint houses. I like paint.
There you go. I just watch paint dry.
Yep.
I remember I've always followed you, and this is just one of my favorite stories. When I first decided, it's like, I've got to systemize things. And I always hear you doing it, and crews going out from a shop because, 10 years ago, hardly any painters had shops. That was not a thing. You had a van and that was it. And then when you started scaling, we had trailers, and then we bought a building, and trying to figure out that there was something missing there. And I reached out to you, and I was like, how do you make sure your guys know what they've got, what they're taking to a job sites? And you emailed me, probably don't even remember it, but you emailed me your list with pictures of what goes in every single van before they leave to go on a job site. And
my inventory infographic. Yeah.
I just remember, I mean, the guy that I sold my company to was my foreman, and he still uses that. He's like,
that's awesome, man.
It's just the amount of knowledge that you have willingly just given away to the industry is just, it's mind blowing. I mean, it's great because you don't see, who was I talking to? I was talking to somebody a couple of days ago that it wasn't 5 to 7 years ago, everything in this business was, that's mine.
Oh, listen, everybody, listen, and I say this safely because some of the things I say sound spicy when I talk about the industry, but I have said that. I used to think that I had a secret or secrets in this industry and that everybody was my enemy. So for me, I've done the full thing. I used to think all of you were my enemy, and now all of you are my greatest allies. So for me, sharing is, it's what servant leaders do, man. And what's interesting is that the things that I share technically are not mind blowing. They're not earth shattering. They're not really innovative. The thinking behind them is innovative for this industry, which is that inventory, that infographic with what I put in Rubbermaid totes is a great example of that, which is when I send that to somebody, I imagine them opening that email, looking at their screen and going, oh, that's it? He doesn't have like a special fancy tool that nobody else does. Like I go to my hardware store and I buy an $8 hammer and some screwdrivers, right? What's innovative about it and what helps people is the thinking behind it, the first principle reasoning of, I don't have any weird stuff. All the stuff I have has been broken down to its simplest form. Everything is a multitasker. There's no extra stuff. It's simple, it's cheap, it's there, and you can restore a Victorian mansion. You can do interior fine finishing. $500 at a hardware store and some Rubbermaid totes, and you can be the finest craftsperson on the planet.
And you can use that as a investment guide if you want to start adding crews. You know what it's going to take to add a crew. I mean, it's a great tool. I mean, and so that kind of leads me into, I kind of had this on my cheat sheet over here. You and I have talked in the past with my history in the manufacturing side, and I know a lot of people have mentioned in comments or asked, why doesn't Nick use 2K? Why isn't Nick on the 2K world, on the cabinet coatings? I know the reason, but like, give the community your thoughts as a residential repaint guy, why you stick with the products that you use. Because I think it's a fantastic one that people need to think about.
Yeah, what's really interesting is it doesn't have to do with what people think it does. I'm not one of these naysayers that like, that stuff's all BS or whatever. No, I love them. Actually, we just did for the retired CEO of Famous Dave's in Minnesota, a very famous restaurant company here. He had this beautiful handcrafted dining room table that he wanted the middle section black. And I thought, you know what? I have all my standard architectural coatings that are beautiful, but let's do that. I use these products. I know these products. I love these products. I know that they're great. We did this table. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Like we actually used a 2K tabletop finish, and it is amazing. It is amazing. The reason I don't use them every single day is because we are a couple of reasons. We're an apprenticeship company. If you bring a bunch of decent human beings into this company and things go wrong, even if you're there to support them and coach them and fix it with them, they get bummed out and they leave. They do not want to fail. They want constant wins all the time. Second reason is on a scale of 0 to 100, 0 being the worst painting job ever and the best painting job ever being 100, me and my master crafts people can probably do a 95 to a 98 because nobody's perfect, right? We can get it so close, so good in a reasonable amount of time. It's awesome. My crafts people, just under my master crafts people, can probably do an 88. My apprentices can probably do a 78. My clients only require a 75. So if I'm being honest, that's not saying clients don't have a good, that they're not good at judging quality. I'm saying the standards of my company are so high that our baseline is already exceeding the client's expectations. So you have to ask yourself as a business owner then, why don't we use high gloss fine paints of Europe on everything? Well, because there is a high failure rate. There's a frustration rate. There's a high redo rate. I don't know very many people who follow my SOP for gloss oil stuff and do it only once. Most people, you'll go through it about 2-3 times or repeat steps a bunch of times. If you want to lose employees and lose people you've invested in, good people, have them redo work or touch up. So for me, I would say this isn't an argument against 1K, 2K, all the fancy stuff. This is an argument for if you want to run a $3 million plus company that wins national awards for quality and do that for a very long time with no stress and be around a whole bunch of awesome people, it's slightly easier and better to do it with coatings that are very predictable and ready off the shelf, right? Reason number 3, our standard enamel for cabinets and trim, we used 1,100 gallons last year. And there's many days during the week that we need 1 extra gallon. We cannot mail order. We cannot mail. There's 6 months of our year, the winter tries to kill you. We cannot mail order stuff here. So for all those reasons, this is not an argument against those products. This is an argument for, I run a business. I love my people. I want to support them. I want to have the lowest stress possible, the highest value coatings. That's where I found them. We also use them all the time too.
Yes. The off the shelf one was the one that I think you and I have talked about in the past via email and stuff. And it makes perfect sense. I mean, they are coming more and more common, but they're still not, the consistency is, it's a water-based coating. Consistency is just not there.
There's a whole bunch of nutty master craftspeople that are single owner operators around the country that I'm friends with. When they know they're doing one cabinet job a week, one cabinet job every 2 weeks, perfectly fine to mail order stuff. And they're on top, they're estimating, they're project managing, they're doing the work. They know within a pint how much paint they're going to use. We got 2 project managers that order paint, and they're not always perfect, right? And it's just one of those things where if you want to start losing clients and making your craftspeople angry, hey, we were going to make a nice clean break this Thursday evening, but now we don't have paint, so now we got to come back Tuesday. You make that call to a client and tell them that. That is not a great situation. So, and so for me, the logistics aren't bad, except when you use 1,100 gallons of it a year, right? And you need it on a moment's notice. What you're never going to get an argument out of me is quality and price. I don't care what a product costs. If you or a manufacturer or anybody else were to say, here is a 2-coat cabinet process, you can call it self-priming, you can call it sticks to anything, you can do whatever else. You don't have to sand, you don't have to do anything. All you do is put 2 coats of this on cabinets. It sticks to everything. It's the most durable product. It's the most beautiful. I'll pay $500 a gallon. I'll pay $500 a gallon.
If you can do it in 2 coats, that's it.
I'll use 1,500 gallons next year. I would do that in a second. So for me, price has never been an issue. That doesn't even come up on my radar of things that I have to solve as a business owner.
So as a business price, I want to hit on that one. That just kind of reminded me of another question, one I get all the time. And I know my feelings. When you're estimating projects, what are your thoughts on labor versus material, separate or one whole estimate?
Oh yeah, this is easy for me. My clients get a price. They just get a price. And they'll say, can you break it out labor and materials? They'll say, I can predict. I can't tell you exactly what we're going to do. That's job costing. Once we do your job, we can tell you how much we used, but we're using a mountain of data, both production rates and material usage, to predict this. And yeah, we can break it out for you. I mean, I can generally say 15% of all my jobs are materials and 40% is labor, but I don't know. I mean, you get on a stucco repaint, all of a sudden it's 25% labor and 32% materials because it takes more material. That's still a winning job. So personal philosophy, estimates should be 1 page. They should be modular. There should be lots of options. They should be delivered on site, and the client should have a price. I think if you give people too much information, it's actually a value detractor.
I can see that. Yeah. That's some good information for these guys out there. 1 page being huge, but 1 page, but let the customer know what they're getting. Like, don't just say, I'm going to paint your walls.
Yeah, it's very simple. I mean, listen, when you look at our estimates, my estimators have 1 line on a spreadsheet to describe what we're doing. Bedroom, walls, process, price. I mean, that it can't get any more clear. And this is actually something we've been practicing for 6 months, but people think it's easy. Hey, paint the walls in my bedroom. There is a poetic way to word that. And it sounds pretentious, but I do talk with my estimators about poetry a lot, because poetry is the smallest amount of words for the biggest impact. And if you do it right, it's uninterpretable. So I say you got 5 words to let this client know what we're painting. Bedroom walls, no closet. Think about it. This is actually more difficult than people think. Hey, Zach, I want my bedroom painted. Great. Bedroom walls, this. Well, the client calls you back 3 days later. Does this include the closet? And if you say no, they'll say, well, I thought it did. So it's actually like you have to build a maze around clients when you do that sort of thing. So there's a lot to it that people don't give that credit for.
No, you have to. I mean, I like that. It's poetry. 5 words, describe it. I've never thought about that.
And how can you make it uninterpretable?
Yeah, uninterpretable is huge because everyone just reads in what they want. Like,
and also, are you an iPhone guy or an Android guy, Zach?
iPhone.
Have you ever read the agreement that they send you, the user agreement? If you put too much, nobody will read it.
My wife says that she's a firm believer that Apple has pretty much screwed everybody as far as the ability to read terms and agreements. No one reads them anymore, and she blames it on Apple because no one's going to read that.
Nobody's going to read it. And the good thing is, if everybody wants what you have, you can do whatever you want. The problem is there's so much, I'm not going to call it competition, but there's so many options in the painting world that if you do that, they'll just go to the next guy who doesn't have that. So again, it's like, you want to cover yourself. You want to make sure the client gets value. But again, I would challenge everybody on your estimate. If you have a one line where they want the ceiling in a bathroom painted, see if you can describe it in 5 words. It's harder than you think.
That's a good one. What about, so like, as far as you guys up in Minnesota, like any specific strategies you guys have used to put yourself above your competition that in your market specific that might be beneficial to the community?
Yeah. So here's the deal. Data and feelings. The data is we are much better painters than most other painters here, just because we are, right? Insane amount of training, insane amount of standards, highest quality stuff. We have a crazy rigorous support system and a closeout system. And, our people are nutty craftspeople, right? So I know we're better painters, but if I'm being honest, our clients don't care and they can't tell. Like if they get 3 estimates, they don't know who's the better painter. I mean, you can look at some reviews, you can ask around, but they don't objectively know who's the better painter. We know that. So if we get a chance, we know we win. We know we win, right? So the biggest challenge for me is getting a chance to show them that we're good. So how we win, Zach, is professionalism. And this is something that I fought for a lot of years because I thought very early in my career that I could be curmudgeonly, stubborn, old master craftsperson that did 99 out of 100 every time. I wouldn't have to run a business. People would put up with me because I was so good and be like, oh, that's just old grumpy Nick. He does so good work. Just don't talk to him when he's work. Turns out people also want a good experience. And the longer I do this, the more I realize almost all of our homeowners have a baseline of if we hire a painter, we assume it's going to be a good painting company. So you're not going to win on quality, right? You're not going to win on quality in the client's eyes. You can say, well, we do a better service. It's like, honestly, the client's going to look at timeline and price and if they trust you. So for me, it's the professionalism. How fast can we answer the phone? How fast can we answer emails? How fast can we get them an estimate? Can we be there on time? Can we deliver the estimate on site? We start an automatic follow-up cycle. We start a manual follow-up cycle. And we basically stand there saying, everybody else doesn't answer their phone. Everybody else no-shows. And guess what? Through attrition, we're just going to get more chances. And then through those chances, we're going to win. And then we get more word of mouth.
My father-in-law, when I first started, he said the same thing to me. It's like, if you just answer your phone, return calls, you will outlast 90% of the other guys out there.
People complain right now, like, where's all the leads? I'm dead in the water, this and that. Right now, we are smack dab in the golden era of painting. Like literally, if you are not a crook and you answer your phone, you will have a successful business. But you have to consistently not be a crook and consistently answer your phone, not just when you need it. And that's not always going to be the place. I'm not a prognosticator. I don't know when. It might be 5 years. It might be 50 years from now. The industry is going to be full of me's out there, right? Because people are going to find out that there's this crazy economic return. And guess what? You without a website, you won't even have this chance you have now, right? So we are literally in the golden era of the painting industry. 99% of the companies out there in the US are super unprofessionalized and fragmented. And there's a couple people at the top doing really, really good. And we're seeing people coming into this industry are more entrepreneurial, more diverse, and more young. And it's only going to be a matter of time. Like there's a whole bunch of people I know where a guy will just pop up on my feed and say, hey man, I've been watching you for a little bit. Got time for a call? Get on a call. He's been in the painting industry for 13 months and he has a $1.6 million business. And there's no head trash about it. There's not like I struggled, I did this like you, Nick. It's like, no, I have 2 brain cells to rub together. I showed up here. I hired a bunch of people. We give solid estimates. We do a good job, and we just act high velocity. It's like, why? What does everybody else do? I'm like, oh, you don't know the industry, do you? Like that's what, like they're completely unburnished by sort of the stink of what goes on in home service contracting. So I'm seeing a lot of that. So I will tell you this: no social media presence, no website, no Google listing. You don't have a separate checking account. You don't have a separate phone. No company branding, no marketing system. You have a number of years left. You're going to run out of family and friends and neighbors to paint for. And then times like this happen where leads don't fall into your lap. It's not done for you and it gets tough. So this is not me getting spicy and pushing back. This is me saying, coming from somebody, if we go into a recession, I have 40 people, right? Nobody thinks about this more than me. I have probably 80 to 100 humans who get some portion or the main amount of their economic sustenance from my company. Nobody thinks about this more than me.
I did that with, when I had 10, 12 guys, the same thing. Like, it'll keep you up at night thinking it's not just your family. There's 10 other families that are relying on you to make sure the business is there. But yeah, that's a lot to think about. 80, holy moly.
I love the burden though, man. I absolutely love it. I was put on this earth to do things like this, and it's something I love to facilitate.
It is a lot of fun. Like, I mean, it's stressful. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, of course. Come on. Everybody would do it.
Yeah. I miss owning a business. And then I'm like, should I start another one? No, I don't want that. I'll do podcasting. That'll be much easier.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned experience, and I tell this to a lot of guys. So when customer experience, and I was wondering if you've read this book called Inside the Magic Kingdom.
Mm-mm.
I used to work previous life. I worked at Avis Rent-A-Car. I was an airport manager in Denver, and we had a guy named Dave Olson, and everybody called him Disney Dave because he preached customer service off of this book that everyone had to read. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's called Inside the Magic Kingdom. It's a fiction book about a guy who takes like 3-4 CEOs and walks them through Disney and how Disney creates the experience that they do and how different it is. And he kind of starts it with, all right, Mr. Hardware Store, who's your competition? Same thing, Mr. Painter, who's your competition? And Nick's my competition. Home Depot's my competition. And he's like, no, anyone that provides a better customer experience is your competition. Like, it doesn't matter. So like, I've always had that kind of ingrained in the back of my head that, it doesn't matter what industry it is. Experiences, that's what people remember. They remember the experience of the estimate, how polite, how professional, what vehicle you drove up in. If it was, what van that everyone always says,
yep,
it says free candy on the side, covered in paint. People remember
rusty van. Yep.
and I try to get that into people's heads a lot, that it's an experience from the phone call to giving them the final invoice. That's one experience. And if it's a shitty one, they're going to share it probably twice as much as they would if it was a good one.
You bring up a really good point, which is, who's your competition? It's not my buddy Rob Lenzen Painting, who gets mentioned all these groups here. It's Amazon. Amazon has one-click buy. That's what when people want to purchase something, either a bedroom being painted or a dress, they click 2 buttons and it shows up at their house. Confirmation emails. If something doesn't work out, there's like a process for getting your money back and returning and everything else. So yeah, you're right. It's not based on other painting companies, because most painting companies don't offer a good service. It's literally based on every other super professional company out there. And that's tough to compete against, man. You got to be super consistent.
That's what it is. That's who you're competing against. And consistency is key, and professionalism, like you said. Like you say all the time, just be a decent human being.
Well, and you bring up, so it's been really interesting now, because every once in a while, I have estimators tell me like, man, I haven't sold as many jobs as I'd like to this week. And people are starting to push back on price. And I'll say, clients will say, well, you guys were too expensive. And I'll say, compared to what? Because the average lifespan of a painting business in the US is 18 months,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I would say I've been around for 10 times longer than the average painting business. Turns out I'm priced to stay in business and they are not. So if you can say you're too expensive, I'll say, well, here's the deal. I have the biggest competitive advantage on earth. I'm still going to be around if you ever call me again.
Yeah.
If you don't like your deck stain 3 months from now, guess what? We actually answer the phone. If you have your cabinets painted by somebody, there's a 1 in 10 chance they will even be alive in this industry 18 months from now. So that's, if you want an experience, how about just being around to be able to provide an experience?
Just being here long enough.
Just being here. Yeah. And we actually answer our phones.
I was at a paint store one day and this guy came in and I knew he's, I've gone up against him a couple times. Nice kid. He was young and probably been around a year. He comes up, he's like, "Oh, you're Zach." And I'm like, "Yeah, nice to meet you, man." He's like, "You charge too much, man." And I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, I saw one of your estimates. You charge too much. You're never going to get business." And I'm like, "Well, we've been around for 20 years, but if I'm charging too much, wouldn't that be like a good thing for you?" It's like, maybe you're not charging enough, but yeah, that one always gets me.
It's coupon mindset, right? It's like, we sometimes think that the only reason we get jobs is because we beat somebody else on price. And there was a great example of that. And of course, we'll never know a pure data set because we do not interview every one of our clients. And even if we did, humans are squishy and they probably wouldn't give us the perfect information. But we had one client on a monster exterior repaint in the best neighborhood that we're in. And the guy literally said, so we were out there and we were doing a walkthrough with an assistant project manager. And the assistant project manager asked the homeowner a clarifying question. And the homeowner called us like super angry. And he's like, "Listen, I hired you. You were twice as much as the other people. You have such good reviews. And I thought this was going to be solved. Why are you still asking me questions?" And so I immediately got on the phone with the guy and I was like, "Oh no, listen, this is trust but verify stuff. Like we have an assistant project manager walking through this to make sure, like we have all our notes that you gave us and we're doing that." And he's like, "Oh, never mind. That's awesome." In the end, he gave us one of the best online reviews ever, which is you get what you pay for. And we paid him more. He gave us more. And that's what it is. But that's that service thing. If you want to get out there and charge people more, you're going to have to get on the damn tuxedo and roll out the red carpet. You're going to have to give them a hell of an experience.
Yes. You have to give them experience if you're going to charge what you need to survive and make money. And then the other one that got me on the business side is I was always, we're in a service-based business. That's what this is. You're selling hours, plain and simple. So I'm real strong in, on average, you have 2,000 hours per head to sell a year. They're going to take off vacation. Yeah.
40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year. Yep.
You're going to 2,000 hours per person. That's what you got. You're going to pay more on overtime. They're going to pay more on overtime. You can't figure that. You can't force them to work overtime. It's illegal. If you're running a business the right way.
In Minnesota, it's actually legal and you can fire them if they don't do overtime. Not something I traffic in, but it's a weird law, right?
That is a weird law.
It's a weird law.
You can fire them if they don't do overtime. Man, that's interesting.
I check on these laws once a year, and that's a weird one, especially come from Minnesota. We're very on the side of labor, and I don't disagree with that, but that's a weird law. So never mind. I'm sorry to sideline you.
That's all right. No good. But I mean, trying to get people to understand that, you have finite number of hours to sell. If you have employees, it's 2,000 hours. So you can work backwards and find out how much you're going to make versus what it's costing you pretty simply.
Very quickly.
Very quickly. But a lot of guys, they struggle with that one. Like, how do you in your master classes, how do you get guys to kind of understand that? Is that
well, we actually do a whole bunch of like first principle reasoning. When somebody says, "Well, what do you charge for X?" And I'll say, "Let's go at it this way. How much do you want to make this year?" Right. So it's one of those things where it's like, hey, if you want to take home 75K, which I would argue is you could work as a painter for somebody for $75K, but people set their sights pretty low. I would argue you should be taking home six figures as a solo entrepreneur. But you basically start from there, which is, you win half the jobs you bid. So you got to go bid out, 300K to make 150. And then you basically take your 2,000 hours divided by 150, and then you get a certain amount of charge rate you're going to have to do per hour. And then we go back to my proverbial bedroom, my training bedroom, which is the hallmark in my company is in 3 months in my company, you have to paint that bedroom in 4 hours, start to finish, the walls in it. And so basically when you look at that, if you can do a bedroom in 4 hours, I like my people to produce $75 of revenue an hour. You can reasonably expect a W-2 painter to produce $140,000 to $160,000 for the business a year. And likewise, you can just back that up. How long does it take you to paint that bedroom? And are you going to hit that 150K mark doing that? And it's a simple, like, first principle reasoning thing, but almost nobody does it.
Nobody does it. I didn't realize it when I got into the business, how much it wasn't being done out there. And when you take a step back, you're like, we've got to figure out how to get that training more out there so we can get rid of the persona that our industry has.
Well, and so it's always good to mention, like, it's not because people are dumb or stupid. It's a common story that I see, and this is my theory of why we have a deeply fragmented, unprofessionalized industry, which is there's not enough good professional painting businesses to hire all the great craftspeople out there. So again, Zach starts a company. He's got 15 people, paying them really well. And all of a sudden it's like, hey man, I'm making $35 an hour working for Zach. I feel like I should be making 45. So if Zach's not going to immediately give me that, I'm just going to go on my own and I'm going to charge $45 an hour. Not knowing that you need to produce $75 of revenue an hour to pay for taxes and insurance and overhead and all that other stuff to even survive. Now you leave Zach's company, you charge $45 an hour, 18 months later, you find out about taxes and you go out of business. And that literally is a story of our company. So we have a whole bunch of great craftspeople, great laborers, great technicians out there running companies when they've never been prepared to. And there's a decision tree there, which is, maybe they were never supposed to. And I don't want that to sound like a value judgment. I have a 4-year college education with 2 minors in business and accounting, and I wasn't prepared to start a business. That didn't make it easier for me, right? So somebody who has never had that depth of education, hasn't had this many years in the industry, starting off on your own after painting for Zach for 3 years, I mean, that is the hardest feat of all, with no business training and no support, especially if you're not connected to the PCA and guys like Zach and me and things like that. So it's amazing it works at all, Zach, if I'm being honest.
That's a good point. I mean, it is. You're speaking some truth, Nick. I love it.
Well, it is what it is. Now, I don't want to lean on that because I am the board chair of the PCA, the Painting Contractors Association, and that you could paint a pretty bleak picture of our industry from that. But I will tell you this. Like I mentioned, when I travel around, I'm seeing young, diverse, entrepreneurial, aggressive people out there building super professional businesses, and not just growing businesses off of subcontractors' backs and things like that. People doing world-class finishing with subs, without subs, around subs, creating their own W-2s. It's an amazing landscape out there. And all I'm saying is in 10 years, this is going to feel a lot different. And we are literally in the golden era of opportunity right now.
I mean, it's changed so much in just the amount of time from when I entered the business 12 plus years ago, almost 15 years ago, when I got into the business to where it is now is mind blowing. Like the transition that we've made. I still remember I was talking to my father-in-law not that long ago. It's probably been, we talk anytime we're together, we just talk business. And we were talking about when I first started and got it into water-based, and he's like, that stuff's trash. Don't mess with it. Don't do water-based paint. It's horrible. And I go to the manufacturing side, all water-based, and he's like, man, is that stuff even, they always say it's coming. And just start showing him some stuff. And I'm like, here, this is water-based. And he's like, shut up. No, it's not. That's not water-based.
I know.
He's 72 and he's like, no. There's no way.
He used to use oil and Pervo. You're not going to pry that out of his cold, dead hands, man.
I mean, satin and Pervo is gold. Satin and Pervo. And he doesn't even like the new the new Regal. It's been reformulated so many times. And he's like, I need the Regal from 20 years ago in satin and pervo, and leave me alone. That's it.
Yeah, dude, those old timers. My dad was that guy too, man. And I was too. I got trained in that. I know what you're talking about, man. Yeah.
They're good products, but there's just, the technology is getting better and better. And the people, you're seeing so many younger guys in there, which is good. And what I've noticed, that I think the next progression that we have to work on, and kind of the purpose for the podcast, bringing the finishers in line with the manufacturing companies to fill that void that's there, to get the right tools and the right products, is getting some younger people on the manufacturing and the equipment side. I think that is it. There's a lot of guys that are aging out on that side. I'm talking to them, and even on the formulating side, there's a huge gap. If we don't get that gap filled in this industry, I think you're going to see the technology kind of hit a pause and almost go in the wrong direction, because there's so many guys that are looking to get out and there's no one backfilling them.
Well, manufacturers are very sophisticated, especially with the new high science coatings and things like that, especially when you get into names that are not emerald trim urethane, that are pedestrian names. When you start getting into numbers and letters, a combination thereof, and a lowercase h meaning a different coating than something else, and then you have an unprofessionalized, fragmented industry, there's a huge gap between there, man. So I think manufacturers are coming around, the painting community is coming around, but there's still a big gap in there. So I think full adoption of this stuff, you're going to need Sherpas, right? Like the young people like you're talking about, and you're going to need some simplification in there too, because there's a world. I pulled up for this tabletop finish. I did pull up because I wanted to look through all the technical data sheets and make sure I had, correct wet mill, drying time, everything else, mixing ratios between catalyzers, hardeners, and all this and that. I pulled it up on the list of technical data sheets, and this is not one that you're associated with. It's a local one here. And I scrolled like 32 rolls of my mouse, and all of it was number and letter combinations of coatings. And it was, at some point, I was just like, I don't have enough time to read through this. And I've been doing this for 32 years and I know molecular science. So I just called my rep and I just said, please just send me so even with me, somebody who's interested and wants to learn this stuff, there still is a gap. So we'll get there, man. Right.
And that was my big deal when I was on the manufacturing side, was simplification and making it availability and simplification. That's what you've got to get the coatings down to if you want to get it in mass quantities. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, just like for our clients, you want experience, you have to make it easy. If you put any amount of hurdles or friction in front of a painter or a client, it's so easy for them to choose the easy button,
Always the easy button. I mean, and let's talk about who's perfected. I mean, and we could talk about who's perfected the easy button. I mean, I don't think anybody's perfected as good as Sherwin-Williams have. I mean, they've got it down to a science.
Well, listen, if just by putting a store near your house, how more easy can you get, right? I mean, literally, it's like, that is a hell of a business strategy.
Just put them everywhere. I mean, and they've done well. I mean, I can't claim them, can't knock them for what they've done in the industry and how simple they've made going to order good coatings.
Removing friction points. Yep. Especially for the architectural world,
Yeah, that is a huge one. So my favorite question, I mean, this is going to be tough for you. Because I'm gonna hold firm, but we can't use hunting or family. Tell us something about Nick that might surprise the community that we may not know.
I'm always afraid to go too deep and too far on something like this.
I mean, like a hobby that we may not know about, or what you do when you're not traveling the world, preaching business or running the business. What's Nick outside of the coatings world?
I am deeply into what I would call a restoration lifestyle or a restorative lifestyle. I like land management. I like surrounding myself with big, complicated land management projects that take decades to come to fruition. Perfect example is I get no more joy. People kind of know this about me, but they probably don't know how serious I am about it. I have my farm. I have it broken up into 6 different biomes, and I have a 30-year plan for each biome. And I am enacting those plans right now. Just this year, we did 475 tree plantings, white oaks, red oaks, things like that, all over strategically on the property. I will never see the benefit of those. My kids and grandkids will, right? We are constantly restoring native prairie. I'm starting plants that take decades to grow here. We're planting weeping willow trees because they're my wife's favorite trees strategically around the farm so that 30 years from now, it'll be a certain way. I do not need immediate gratification. These are things that my kids and grandkids will marvel at. They will have the full benefit of. I will probably not benefit from them in my lifetime. Doesn't mean I don't want to do it. So I don't think people understand the breadth and depth of not only how much effort and thought I put into this, just about as much as my business, but how much I'm deeply satisfied by it. Like last night, I had goal setting and review meetings for my entire company. And for my personality, it takes a lot out of me, right? I got to be supportive to my people. I got to go through that stuff. It drains me. So what I did is I go up into my box blind. I put my hammock there. It was chilly. It was about 60 degrees last night. I lit a wood fire and I listened to the birds last night. And I looked over all my native prairie, all my hardwood trees, my neighbor's beautiful farm, the barn in the distance. And it just completely like a big sigh of relief over me when I see what this, it just humbles you. It just humbles you as a human.
That is impressive. I like that. That is a lot of thought that you put in. I mean, but it does fit your personality. I mean, you don't go into anything that I've just from social media and our short talks for the short gain. It's never little wins are important, but
and so strategically, and this is not a value judgment against these other things, but there's a reason I don't play video games or do some immediate gratification things or even I used to be into old cars. I don't do that anymore because I love the longest long game, developing generational wealth and benefits for my family. And I spend almost my entire waking life thinking about developing my family, developing my business, developing my land. And those 3 things will have generational impacts. Me being into model airplanes or me being into watching sports on TV, this is not a value judgment, not bad. I have my vices, but that doesn't move any of that forward. So for me, I love investing into super long-term things.
I like that. I'm going to have to maybe try to invest into more long-term things because it makes perfect sense. I'm going to have to adopt maybe some of that.
Into that sort of thing,
And I'm sure it's not something that comes right away. It's almost like a learned. You have to learn to appreciate the long-term growth things.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting arc. So I've been getting very intentional with my life. The arc of my life is becoming less extreme and more consistent and more intentional and less unintentional. And that only comes when you have a certain amount of consistency with your family and your business. So you even have the bandwidth and the gas in your tank to do that. So I will tell you this, investing in these long-term generational things is a hell of a lot easier when you run a consistent professional company that spins off profit. It just makes it a little bit easier all the time.
Yes.
So,
just a little bit.
Yeah. And so it's one of those things where I have a spreadsheet with 8 areas of my life, personal and professional. And I have goals written out up to 20 years. And we break it down to basically by the week. What are my goals this week that I need to do? And it just feels like that. All I have to do is that this week and I accomplish the goal. It's like, well, yeah, 52 weeks a year times 10 years. You accumulate a lot of little wins over those years. So people, the theory behind this is people overestimate what they can accomplish in a week and underestimate what they can accomplish in a year. And obviously, we have guys like Jason Paris leading the way on that, who do an amazing job of that as role models. And that is the key. Simple, boring, mundane, sometimes unsexy things done well constantly for a very long time add up in generational changes. It's amazing.
Man, you're dropping some good ones. Golly, I like it.
Sorry, man. I should have just said I like fly fishing or something.
I love it. Well, hey, I know we're getting into that hour. I appreciate you coming on. It's been awesome. Insights, bar none, some of the best that we've had. What about last words of wisdom for the community?
Join the PCA, get in their business training, come to an in-person event. I challenge you to do those. If you do those and your life isn't changed, you personally come talk to me. I could say a million other things. If you do those things and your life isn't changed personally and professionally, you come find me.
Excellent, man. That's a big ask. I've never been to a PCA event. I may have to see if I can't drop in this year.
How dare you, Zach?
I know.
Dare you? I challenge you personally. We just announced PCA in Espanol, residential, commercial, expo, women in paint.
I will be there. I'm going to Atlanta in a couple weeks for the IWF, and I've kind of made it my goal to do more things as, on the podcast side.
Dude, I would love you bring your podcast, you bring yourself to Expo. We got you covered.
All right. Well, let's talk about that for sure. Everybody's got your social media, man. Awesome talk. Thank you for coming on. Thank you, everybody, for watching the Bearded Finisher podcast. Nick, we're going to get you on another episode for sure, probably a live event. And we'll talk to everybody next week.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the Bearded Finisher podcast. We thank everyone for joining. Keep hustling, keep learning, and never settle for anything less than your best. Remember, the path to perfection is a journey, not a destination. Until next time.